Good evening and welcome families and students to our KSA Awards ceremony for the 22-23 Kentucky State Assessment School Year. Thank you for joining us this evening. Boys and girls and special guests, you may not know it, but this is my favorite night of the year because we get to recognize excellence. Each year, our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders spend at least 1 week, sometimes longer, in May completing state assessments. All students in 3rd, 4th, and 5th take a reading test and a math test. 4th graders also take a science test. And 5th graders also take a social studies test and a comprehensive writing exam. This year, instead of having our 5th graders back, they are getting their medals at East Hardin with all the other middle schoolers. So 5th graders who are here tonight, when you do your best this year, you'll get your medals next year at the middle school. So be sure to do your best again so you can go to that ceremony. Because once you're a Bruin, you're always a Bruin, and you get to represent Creekside for the rest of your school career and excellence. And that's what we are recognizing tonight is excellence. Parents, these assessments cannot be memorized. They are application-based assessments. So it's not something that they can just be programmed and practiced to know on command. They have to really think. They're pretty hard. So you are not here tonight because you did your very best on one test or because you did your very best for 1 week of the year. You are here because you have done your best every day for years. You have followed directions, you have listened to what your teacher said, you've been prepared to perform so that when you take these tests, you're ready and you can do it. So we're not honoring you tonight for just one test. We're honoring you tonight for doing your best all the years and all the days that have led up to when you take that test. And we are so proud of you, and we are so excited. And when they actually take the test, they'll tell you, I'm in the hall saying, get your medals, get ready to get your medals. So I'm very excited to give you your medals tonight. All right, and now without further ado, we are going to have Mrs. Atcher come and call the names. Now, we have children who are not here tonight, and they will get their medals tomorrow. Mrs. Atcher has been signing you in to make sure that we're reading the names of the people who are in attendance tonight. So I'm happy to say we are giving out more medals this year than we gave out last year. So great job, boys and girls. And now the wonderful Mrs. Atcher.
Okay, good evening. It's great to see this big crowd on this rainy night, but thanks for coming out, and boys and girls, we're so proud of you. So we're going to start with our 3rd grade students, which were 4th grade this year. Again, like Ms. Custis said, they could receive a distinguished is the highest that you can receive, and proficient is right under that. So tonight we will be recognizing distinguished and proficient students. For the 3rd grade for last year, it could be in reading or math. So some will get 1, some will get 2, okay? So as I call your name, please come down to the floor. If we're okay, we're going to hold our applause to the very end, or we could be here forever. So again, when I call your name, boys and girls, just come to the floor and see Ms. Howard and Ms. Custis. We're going to start with Mason Ammons. He had a distinguished in reading. Kennedy Black, distinguished in reading. Lydia Blair, proficient in reading. Levi Bland, distinguished in reading and distinguished in math. Bryson Carroll, distinguished in reading and distinguished in math. Michael Cave, proficient in reading and proficient in math. Kit Coley, proficient in reading. Bright Cundiff, proficient in math. Penny Donovan, distinguished in reading and distinguished in math. Adonis Ferguson, proficient in math. Eliana Ford, proficient in reading, proficient in math. Kinsey Gray, distinguished in reading. Colin Hart, proficient in reading, proficient in math. Annie Henderson, distinguished in reading, proficient in math. Kanan Holman, proficient in reading. Donald Huffman, proficient in reading, distinguished in math. Dana Langford, proficient in math. Trinity McCracken, proficient in math. Bella Meredith, distinguished in reading. Joshua Nutt, distinguished in math. Waylon Price, distinguished in reading. Riley Pretty, distinguished in reading, proficient in math. Ashton Rigdon, proficient in reading, proficient in math. Trace Riggs, distinguished in reading, proficient in math. Adeline Singh, distinguished in reading, proficient in math. Abigail Summers, proficient in reading, proficient in math. Brooke Hull, proficient in reading, proficient in math. And Keely Thomas Bowen, distinguished in reading, proficient in math. Okay, so these were our third grade students from last year, fourth grade this year. So let's give them a big round of applause. Great job. Now we're going to move on to our fourth grade from last year, fifth grade from this year. They could have received 3 medals. They could have received a medal in reading, math, and or science. So when I call your name, boys and girls, you just come right to the floor like before. Declan Bailey, proficient in math. Ethan Beggs, proficient in reading, proficient in math, proficient in science. Aubrey Carroll, proficient in reading. Wyatt Custis, proficient in reading, distinguished in math, proficient in science. Addison Darlington, proficient in math. Allie Dunn, proficient in reading and proficient in science. Carol Edlin, proficient in reading, distinguished in math, proficient in science. Maisie Fulkerson, distinguished in reading, distinguished in math, proficient in science. Parker Foltz, distinguished in reading, proficient in math. Charlotte Heater, distinguished in reading. Emily Heater, proficient in math. Mackenzie Hebert, proficient in reading, proficient in science. Willow Hornback, proficient in math. Lydia Huff, distinguished in reading, proficient in math, proficient in science. Xavier Hunt, proficient in reading, distinguished in math, proficient in science. Katie Jorgensen, distinguished in reading, proficient in math. Chloe Knight, proficient in math. Braden Malcolmson, proficient in reading. Jaylee Meredith, proficient in reading, proficient in math. Eve Morris, proficient in reading, distinguished in math, proficient in science. Jesselyn Nosco, proficient in reading, proficient in math. Elena Phillips, proficient in reading, proficient in math, proficient in science. Corbin Powell, proficient in reading, proficient in math. Wyatt Price, proficient in reading, proficient in math. Aubrey Samuel, proficient in math. Kinsley Sharp, proficient in reading, proficient in math. Sydney Wood, proficient in reading, proficient in math. And Emma Wyatt, distinguished in reading, proficient in math, proficient in science. Again, nonchalantly, if I missed someone that came in late, I think we got everybody. Okay, at this time, let's give all of our 5th grade this year, 4th last year, a big round of applause. You want to encourage, they can take pictures out there by the, how's that?
We are so very proud of you. And Ms. Asher, stand back there for a minute. I want to take a minute to thank Mrs. Asher. Mrs. Asher, it's called the BAC, but it stands for the testing coordinator, the assessment coordinator. It is a very big responsibility. It's a very hard job. Mrs. Asher does a great job of getting everything organized for this assessment, keeping us all legal, make sure we're following all the rules. And it's a big process, and Mrs. Asher does it every year. It is fantastic. So let's give her a hand for that. She's a nervous that week, but she does a great job every time. So parents, I want you to feel free to stay and take pictures. You can use the backdrop in the lobby or in here. Boys and girls, we're so proud of you, and you did awesome. And we want you to do it again next year. We want you to give out even more medals. So thank you for coming. Have a good night.